Good evening. Today, let's discuss the unique approaches that both governments as well as private institutions are using in order to get people vaccinated. For instance, over in North Carolina, a leaked video of a Zoom conference call among hospital staff has just surfaced. And in that video, it shows a doctor, the hospital's director of marketing, as well as the hospital president discussing ways to inflate the COVID numbers in order to scare people. Meanwhile, over in Israel, when the Minister of Health thought that he wasn't being recorded, he spoke rather candidly about vaccine passports. And according to him, there is no medical justification for these COVID passports, and the only purpose for them is to pressure citizens into vaccine acceptance. And then lastly, over at the U.S. Army, they are taking a slightly different approach. According to a leaked PowerPoint slide, which was part of a presentation given to the soldiers in order to justify the vaccine mandates, it lists the 7 tenets of Satanism. Let's go through it all together. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman, from the Epoch Times. And now let's begin today's discussion by talking about COVID scare tactics. A leaked Zoom conference call has just surfaced, which came from a hospital over in North Carolina, and what it shows is fairly surprising. That's because in this leaked video, it shows a doctor over at this hospital questioning how they can increase the official count of their COVID numbers in order to scare people. Let me just repeat that for a moment. In this leaked video, the doctor is shown discussing how they can inflate the number of people who are classified as COVID patients in order to generate more fear in the unvaccinated. Now, for your reference, this video was first obtained by the National File, and it shows Dr. Mary Catherine Ruddock speaking with Ms. Caroline Fisher, who is the hospital's director of marketing. And due to copyright reasons, I can't actually show you the clip, but I will read you a transcript of what was said. I think we have to be more blunt. We have to be more forceful. We have to say something coming out, if you don't get vaccinated, you know you are going to die. Let's just be really blunt to these people. In another part of the video, the director of marketing is explaining how her department is communicating what she calls meaningful numbers to the general public, which includes things like the percentage of people who are vaccinated, the percentage of people who are unvaccinated, as well as the percentage of deaths in the ICU, to which Dr. Ruddock responds this way. My feeling at this point in time is that maybe we need to be completely a little bit more scary for the public. There are many people still hospitalized that we're considering post-COVID, but we are not counting in those numbers. So how do we include those post-COVID people in the numbers of patients we have in the hospital? And so just to clarify, this doctor, who is on a Zoom call with the hospital's director of marketing, she is suggesting including people in this tally who are no longer COVID patients, and she wants to do this because, in her own words, she wants it to be a little bit more scary for the public. Now, the director of marketing seemed to be a little taken aback by this suggestion, and she asked for clarification. She asked this doctor whether she meant that every patient who has been in the hospital since the beginning of COVID should be included in the count. And here's how this doctor responded. Well, that are still in, and that's something I can take to someone else, but I think those are important numbers. The patients that are still in the hospital, that are off the COVID floor, but still are occupying the hospital for a variety of reasons. Now, what's interesting to note is that also on the Zoom conference call was Mr. Shelburne Stevens, who is the president of this hospital over in North Carolina. And at this point in the conversation, Mr. Stevens chimed in, and he said that technically those patients are classified as being recovered. And then he added this. But I do think, from our standpoint, we would still consider them a COVID patient because they're still healing. This doctor then agreed and said that those patients need to be highlighted as well because once they're off isolation, they drop them from the COVID numbers. This then prompted the hospital president to respond to this doctor by saying that they can talk later offline about how, quote, we can run that up to marketing. And so naturally, this video recording was pretty damning. I mean, it clearly shows the doctor, the director of marketing, as well as the hospital president discussing ways to pump up their numbers in order to scare people. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we reached out to this hospital in order to, for one, confirm that the people in the video were actually employees, and secondly, we wanted to know what the context of this video call was. And a spokesperson for this health system, they got back to us via email confirming that this video was in fact legitimate. And then furthermore, the spokesperson for this hospital, he justified the leaked conversation by saying that the staff members who were featured in this video are seeing, quote, the highest levels of COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths so far in this pandemic, despite having safe and effective vaccines widely available. In that same email, the spokesperson further added that this was an honest discussion about providing a complete picture to the local community. Here's what he wrote. This was a frank discussion among medical and communications professionals on how we can more accurately convey the severity and seriousness of what's happening inside of our hospitals and throughout our communities. Specifically, the data we have been sharing does not include patients who remain hospitalized for COVID complications, even though they are no longer on COVID isolation. So it does not provide a complete picture of the total impact of COVID on our patients and on our hospitals. The spokesperson ended the email by saying that the hospital system continues to be concerned with misinformation and that they are, quote, striving to be transparent and tell the whole story. Now, what's interesting to note is that this issue is not confined solely to North Carolina alone. In fact, a recent study, which was conducted jointly by the Harvard Medical School, Tufts Medical Center, and the VA healthcare system, it found that COVID hospitalization numbers throughout all of the U.S. might be significantly inflated. Specifically, they found that the hospitalization numbers in America could be highly exaggerated since almost half of the hospitalized patients displayed only mild symptoms. And according to these researchers, this suggests that they were likely admitted to the hospital for reasons unrelated to COVID. Here's in fact part of what the study says on this front. With widespread vaccination, the current definition of COVID-19 hospitalizations includes progressively more mild or incidental diagnosis, for example, cases identified prior to surgery or prior to discharge, rather than hospitalizations due to severe COVID-19. This study then goes on to point out the fact that almost all hospitals in America, they currently require new patients to undergo routine and often mandatory COVID screen testing in order to get admitted, leading potentially to the number of hospitalizations caused by the virus to be substantially overestimated. So just to give you an example of what that actually looks like in practice, let's say you go to the hospital because you have a sprained ankle. They do a routine COVID test on you and they find out that you have the virus, and then boom, you're now a COVID patient, even though you came to the hospital in order to get your ankle fixed. Now, the reason for this is it has to do with the way that the CDC surveillance network, which is called COVIDnet, it has to do with the way that they define a COVID case. According to their website, a COVID case is defined, in their system at least, if the patient, quote, tests positive for SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19 disease, through a test ordered by a healthcare professional and are hospitalized within 14 days of the positive test. Meaning that any patient who is admitted to the hospital within 14 days, within 2 weeks of a positive COVID test, is marked as a COVID patient, regardless of the reason for their admission. And according to this new study, this seems to be especially skewing the data in regards to children. Here's what it says, quote, in a pediatric population, 41% of reported admissions associated with SARS-CoV-2 infection were for reasons other than COVID-19, rates similar to those found when the simple definition of moderate to severe disease was applied in our cohort. Now, this is not the first study to reach this conclusion. In fact, there were 2 previous peer-reviewed studies which focused specifically on kids, and they reached similar conclusions. One of the studies, it claimed that most hospitalized children who tested positive for COVID, they were either asymptomatic or they were hospitalized for something other than COVID. Then the other study, it concluded that, quote, 45% of admissions were categorized as unlikely to be caused by SARS-CoV-2. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we reached out to the CDC for comment on the findings in this study, but we have yet to hear back. Regardless, if you would like to watch either that full leaked video from the hospital over in North Carolina, or if you would like to read this study regarding the over-reporting of COVID cases, I'll throw all that into the description box below this video for you to check out. However, it's interesting to note that that leaked video from North Carolina, it is not an isolated case. In fact, just 1 week ago, Israel's health minister was likewise caught on a hot mic when he thought he wasn't being recorded, and he was talking about how there is no medical justification for COVID passports, and that the only purpose for the passport system is to pressure citizens to get vaccinated. What happened was that, what's this? That's a great question, Roman, and it is today's sponsor, which is an awesome messaging app called Secure. And it's awesome if you actually care about your privacy, because it's not a big secret that our data is being mined and remined by all these big tech companies. And in the year 2020, over 155 million Americans, likely including you and me, were affected by data breaches. And by the way, that's only what's publicly known. However, with Secure, all that stuff that happened in the past, it's in the past, because your emails and messages moving forward can remain private. That's because they have their servers and data centers located right here in Kabul, Afghanistan. No, I'm just kidding. They actually have their data centers and servers here in Switzerland. Now, why does that matter? Well, Switzerland has some of the strictest data privacy laws in the entire world, and they're not subject to the Cloud Act. And if you want to know what that is, head on over to secure.com under their FAQ section, and they explain exactly what that is. Now, the thing that I love most about them is that they don't collect your phone number, they don't collect your private data, they don't mine your data, they don't collect the phone numbers of your friends and family. Instead, everything is private. And best of all, if your friends and family don't use the secure app, it doesn't matter, because the way it works is all your messages are still routed through Switzerland and everything remains private almost no matter what. So head on over to secure.com and use promo code Roman to get 25% off. And the rates aren't even that expensive to start with. It's only $5 for the messenger and $10 for the email and messenger combo. And they offer a 7-day free trial. So head on over to secure.com, use promo code Roman to get 25% off. And now, Roman in the studio, back to you. Now, the incident over in North Carolina is not the only leaked video which was recently released. That's because just 1 week ago, Israel's Minister of Health, he was caught on a hot mic, meaning that he didn't know he was being recorded. And while speaking to one of his peers, he said that there is no medical justification for Israel to have a COVID passport, and that the only purpose for the passport system is to pressure citizens into vaccine acceptance. Here's a translation of part of that conversation. The thing is, I'm telling you, our problem is people who don't get vaccinated. We need to influence them a bit. Otherwise, we won't get out of this pandemic situation. Later in the conversation, the health minister said that a lack of vaccine passport enforcement was overloading the hospital. And then he added this. Let's say a person under 60 to 65 in critical condition arrives at a hospital. Without a doubt, he's unvaccinated. Above 60 to 65, it is 2/3 unvaccinated, 1/3 vaccinated, more or less. COVID is now an event of the unvaccinated. It's irritating that the unvaccinated are taking up beds. And therefore, according to the health minister, even though the Israeli Green Pass, which is the official name of their COVID passport, even though it's not medically justified, it can still help to push people into getting the shot because it makes life too inconvenient without it. If you'd like to check out that full video for yourself, I wasn't able to show it here for copyright purposes, but if you'd like to check out that full-length, candid conversation between the health minister and the Minister of the Interior, I'll throw that into the description box below this video for you to check out. And all I ask in return is that you take a quick second to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And now let's move on back to America and talk about the Army's vaccine mandate. According to a statement that was released by the U.S. Army, the deadline for all active duty troops to be fully vaccinated is December the 15th. And if a soldier is not fully vaccinated by that date, and if he or she does not have a pending exemption request, then they face the threat of being suspended. So that, by the way, applies to all active duty troops. In terms of the other troops, including the National Guard as well as the reserve members, they have until June 30th of next year, June 30th of 2022, to get the vaccine. Furthermore, this statement lays out what will happen to the troops who refuse. In the statement, it says that the soldiers who refuse the vaccine will first be counseled by their chain of command and medical providers. And if they continue to defy the mandate, there may be administrative or non-judicial punishment to include relief of duties or discharge. And these punishments, they can escalate all the way to a soldier being discharged from the service. Here's specifically what it says, quote, "Commanders will request a general officer memorandum of reprimand be initiated for any soldier who refuses to be vaccinated and does not have a pending or approved exemption request. Such reprimands can be career-ending." Furthermore, according to the statement, natural immunity is not grounds for automatic exemption. That's because, according to the statement, it says that any soldier who has survived a previous COVID infection, they are, quote, "not automatically exempt from full vaccination and should consult their primary care managers." Now, in a separate statement, the Army Surgeon General, he said that getting the soldiers vaccinated was literally a matter of life and death. Here's specifically what he said. "Being fully vaccinated is quite literally a matter of life and death for our soldiers, their families, and the communities in which we live. Case counts and deaths continue to be concerning as the Delta variant spreads, which makes protecting the force through mandatory vaccination and a health and readiness priority for the total Army." Now, in order to convince the soldiers who are still wary of getting the shot, the Army has been showing them a PowerPoint presentation which justifies the vaccine mandate. And one of the slides from this PowerPoint presentation, it was leaked to Tucker Carlson over on Fox News. And oddly enough, here's what it shows. On the left, it says, quote, "How many children were sacrificed to Satan for the vaccine?" And then on the right side, it goes on to list the 7 tenets of Satanism, such as one should strive to act with compassion and empathy, and that the struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit. And most ironically, there is point number 3, which says that, quote, "One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone." Now, you might be asking yourself, why exactly was the U.S. Army presenting the 7 tenets of Satanism to the soldiers in a slideshow that was justifying the vaccine mandates? Well, it is not exactly clear. On his program, Tucker Carlson said that he got confirmation from the U.S. Army that that slide was in fact real, but they did not explain its context. Frankly, my best guess is that based on the top of the slide where it says Q&A, somebody asked that question on the left in a prior session, and then the part on the right was the explanation for that previous question, meaning that the U.S. Army was trying to explain to the soldiers that Satanism is a benign religion and that it would never sacrifice children in order to make a vaccine. Regardless, if you would like to check out that full segment on Tucker, I'll throw a link to it in the description box below. And also, if you'd like to check out the article regarding the U.S. Army vaccine mandate, I will throw that into the description box as well. And now lastly, since you finished this episode of Facts Matter, I would highly recommend that you go on over to Epoch TV and check out an awesome episode of American Thought Leaders where Jan sat down and interviewed the inventor of the mRNA vaccine. Take a look at a trailer for that episode.
We need to confront the data as they are, not try to cover stuff up or hide risks.
What does the most recent peer-reviewed research say about the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines?
The logic that supports mandatory vaccination, that's no longer tenable.
In this two-part episode, I sit down again with mRNA vaccine pioneer Dr. Robert Malone for a comprehensive look at the vaccines, repurposed drugs like ivermectin, and the ethics of vaccine mandates.
Look at the logic of what we're confronting. That juggernaut has gotten so wrapped up around a consensus set of truths that are failing now.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Jan Jekielek.
If you'd like to check out that episode or any of the other awesome content over on Epoch TV, I'll throw a link to it at the very top of the description box. I hope you check it out. I hope you click on it. I hope you subscribe. And I hope that you join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful, beautiful world through honest journalism that is based in truth and tradition. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. Also, if you haven't already, hit that notification bell so you can actually be notified of any new episodes when we release them. And then lastly, if you have an Instagram account, consider following me at Epoch Times Roman. I publish spicy memes as well as behind-the-scenes research. Then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.